you let somebody teach you something, they'll be your friend for life.
Yeah, that's what like Ruth said when my wife loved that part of Ruth's conversation where she met the women, where she goes stand in the international food aisle, look at couscous and pretend not to know what to do.
Yeah, but to be vulnerable and to know for sure that there's so much that they can teach you and so much that you can learn. But that's why it works to be in their house eating food that for most Americans have never eaten before. And every Indian house in America, in South Africa, I've been to, has a sink in the corner of the dining room because they eat everything with their hands. So they go to that sink and they wash their hands, they sit down. Once they eat all that curry and stuff and the messy stuff their hands, they go over and wash their hands, and there won't be any utensil on the plates. Maybe some ladles or something like that. And,
we had an Indian missionary guy who was Indian. He came to the U.S. He was staying at our home. He ended up sleeping on the floor, even though we gave him a bed because that was what he was used to. And he was trying to use utensils at the dinner table. And I looked at him and I said, we're Indian friendly here. I said, you can put the utensils. And he was so grateful. He did the Indian head nod, and he put it aside and he started eating. And I said, that's fine. I'll do it too. And I brought it with him.
The churches that, I may have said this too, but I'll let you go. But the churches that made some quick turnarounds toward international work, they did these things. They dedicated their children and they gave them a Bible. This is what Beth and I came up with years ago. And for 5 years, nobody would do it. Now everybody's doing it. Where we go, that when you dedicate, now you have a long conversation with parents beforehand. And then you're going to hear me say the thing that Tim has a hard time doing. It's impossible for him. And you know how much I love him. They give their children a dedication, a Bible, a passport application, and a savings account where the church puts a couple $100 in, and people are to give to it, family members for birthdays, whatever. So by the time that kid is 12, 13, they could have their first mission trip paid for. And you're going to say to parents, we're going to do everything we can to help you raise your children so that they will serve God anywhere in the world that He will send them. And if you are not willing to be an international family, you're in the wrong church. That's the part Tim can't do. And like the other conversation, like, First Baptist Jacksonville for the last 10 years has gone through a hard season. Yeah. And there, in a period of weeks, Tim had 30 some people join Fruit Cove from First Baptist Jackson. I said, don't take them. I said, don't take them. I said, they'll leave you just as quick as they
came in.
Get settled down, they'll go back. And he said, I can't do that. He said, I said, if you don't make church membership count for something, and so he came back, and bless his heart, he called me and he was laughing. They came to him and said, Tim, we just want you to know that so many of us have come from First Baptist Jacks. Once a month, we're going to get together and have a meal together and pray and study the Bible together. And Tim said, no, you're not. And he called me and said, it caught up with me, buddy. But have I told you, this is my last statement. Jim Slack did this with us in the International Mission Board. I don't talk this way anymore, but it does represent a truth that we would talk about front door being your evangelism and your back door being your discipleship. So say, for instance, in Malawi, if 100 people came to Christ, it wasn't that hard. But that's your front door. Mm-hmm. But if in 5 years, more than 20% of them didn't stick and they left and went back to paganism or they went somewhere else, we got a whooping. Mm-hmm. So we had, you want to get your front door really wide and your back door narrow, narrow, narrow. So if it got to 20% or more, we got in trouble. the back door in American churches is 77%.
It's,
For every
yeah, it's
100
high.
people come in, 77 go somewhere else. Church membership means you don't belong to the body of Christ when you're a member. And when 77% is going out the back door, it does. We don't have a body of Christ. We have something else.
Well, and we keep talking, but Tim had mentioned, I said, how many people go to Fruit Cove? He goes, well, 1,300 on a Sunday and then 4,000 are on the membership rolls. And I'm like, wait, what? Like where we were, we changed it. So you actually had to, and again, this is working in our cultural context and it was always moving, but you had to reaffirm your membership every year.
Really?
Yes, we made that as a bit. You had to you had requirements like you.
I want you to talk to me about that the next time.
Well, I don't know how much it worked, but it cleaned up a lot of stuff because we said you got to be, in order to be a member. And I mean, we did a lot of stuff. Like we also fenced the table. I mean, we did this for communion, and we would fence it for a different reason. We would make it open. Like we had what we called it would be flexible. We had to have some type of flexibility, but even with membership, we're like, okay, you want to be a member here, then why you want to be a member? Because that means commitment.
Yes.
And are you committing here? Or are you just and people would show up and this is what I don't understand. Tim has people just show up on a Sunday and they sit up and says, we're members now. And it's like, wait a minute, I've got to vet you. I don't know who you are. I don't know who you're coming into my fellowship. I don't know what your background is. I don't know if you're on discipline. I have no idea. So it takes a lot of work. And again, I don't know. I got to learn the world here, but we had to vet you and we had to get to know you. And then, you become part of the membership.
Where was this?
This was in Aurora, Illinois, where we were. But we also, like I said, we fenced the table and we did that because this was for believers. Not that we're trying to keep unbelievers away, but we'd have people that are like, well, I'm not baptized. Okay, so let me get this straight. You want the intimacy, but you don't want the commitment. Why don't you? And you're willing to obey in one area, but not another. I'm not trying to say that if there's a theological conviction, I just want to understand. And we would have these open conversations, and we try not to make one thing bigger than the other, because we weren't Baptist, we were a Bible church. But we would have we would have people into the fellowship and we'd say, okay, if your mode of baptism was different, we would let you become a member if you could provide a theological explanation and biblical conviction why.
Wow.
But that was a very small percentage. And then they also couldn't propagate that at the church. But we wanted to really hone it in and get people to discern and tell me why you believe this. Why is this important for you? And make it a little bit harder. I'd read Chuck Lawless's book on membership, and we said we've got to make this mean something to people. But when you change that culture, anytime you change a culture,
it's hard.
Well, it's hard, but it's easy to do it in a rowboat than it is a Titanic. To try to turn something around. And I had one guy, leader, tell me, he said, two steps in front of someone, you're a leader. 5 steps and you're a martyr. And so anytime you make a change, you've got to be very careful in how you go about it. And I learned, learned a lot of that. Dr.
Borchard was at Southern Seminary, and he's one of the 3 professors that I would take a bullet for, but all 3 of those guys define themselves as biblicists. And that has meant so much to me that I tell and Jim Slack was that way at the board, that I always tell myself the biblical stories, the principles for every decision or problems that I've got. So I'm not coming from just a denominational doctrinal place. I'm a biblicist, and I really have found so much freedom in that. But in Canada, he said, when you want to become part of the church, you went before the deacons. Their churches tend to be smaller, and they had an in-depth conversation with you, and you talked about your salvation and all that. And when you desired to leave that church, you had to go before the deacon body and give the reasons why you're leaving. And they would never recommend or give you a letter or whatever it was, a recommendation to another Baptist church in the same community. They would never do that. You had to be leaving, going
The
somewhere.
area.
They will never. They said, if your membership meant so little that you could walk across the street and join another church, they said that we wanted you to be part of the body of Christ, not a member of a church. And he said, we just made it count for something, that they interviewed you coming in. And if you're leaving, they wanted to interview you and bless you going out, and then help you research a like-minded church where you were going. And they would even recommend some of them, because they knew their world in Canada so much. It was smaller, but they knew it a lot better. I like that.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I do think
you just have a good day, and
you too.
I don't have to be on the radio to talk to you.
I'll remember that too. I need your number sometime, because I want to talk again when we get time more, because we need to.
Can you just write it down?
Yeah, give me your number.
It's a Jacksonville phone. It's 904-226-8094. Text, call anytime you want to.
Okay, I'll text you my number, and it'll have my name in it, and then you'll know.
All right, Travis.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Have a great day, brother.
You too, Clint.
Thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you for the time and being such a good teacher. I love sitting at your feet.
Oh, it's a joy. It's just a joy. Can't wait to see what God does with you.
Me too.
Me too.
Talk to you later, sir.